Judge Judy had heard every kind of insult that could echo through a courtroom. She had watched wealthy executives underestimate ordinary workers. She had watched smooth talkers believe confidence could replace evidence. But on this particular morning, the entire room froze when the defendant leaned back in her chair, smirked, and said with unmistakable contempt, "Maybe if your accent was easier to understand, you'd know what really happened." No one laughed, not the bailiff, not the gallery, not even the defendant's own attorney. Judge Judy didn't blink. She simply rested one hand on the worn brown folder already sitting in front of her. Her expression never changed, yet something about that silence made the courtroom feel colder than before. The woman who had entered believing she controlled every conversation had no idea that 47 seconds later, she would be struggling to hold back tears in front of everyone watching, because what looked like a careless insult wasn't just disrespect. It was the first mistake in a chain of mistakes that would completely destroy her credibility. Pay close attention to what happened next, because this wasn't the moment Judge Judy lost control. It was the moment she quietly took it. Before this story goes any deeper, make sure you're subscribed for more unforgettable courtroom stories like this. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because this case is about to take a turn nobody inside that courtroom expected. Judge Judy had spent decades listening far beyond the words people chose. Experience had taught her that arrogance often announces itself before the evidence ever appears. Bodies confess before mouths do. While Karen believed she had landed a humiliating insult, Judge Judy was already studying something else entirely, Karen's eyes. They never once drifted toward the evidence table. Instead, they kept returning to the same sealed envelope resting beside the clerk. That tiny detail escaped everyone else, but not Judge Judy. A courtroom has a pulse, and that morning everyone felt it change. The plaintiff, Michael Bennett, quietly tightened his grip on an old leather document case. Its corners were cracked from years of use, and one faded shipping label still clung to the side. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't impressive. But Judge Judy noticed the way he protected it with both hands, almost as though it contained something more valuable than money. Sometimes people don't protect evidence. They protect memories. Karen noticed the old case, too. She laughed under her breath before speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. "That's cute," she said. "Maybe he brought family scrapbooks instead of proof." A few uneasy glances spread through the gallery. Michael never answered. His silence wasn't weakness. It looked like someone carrying the exhausting weight of being dismissed one too many times. Judge Judy observed the exchange without interrupting. Innocent people often explain. Manipulative people perform. Karen seemed determined to fill every second of silence with another display of confidence. The dispute appeared ordinary on paper. Karen, owner of a successful marketing consulting firm, insisted Michael was fabricating a breach of contract claim after she refused to pay him for specialized translation and localization work completed for an international campaign. According to Karen, Michael had misunderstood instructions because, as she repeatedly hinted, communication wasn't exactly his strongest skill. The words sounded polished, professional, almost believable. But something about the timing bothered Judge Judy. Karen wasn't defending the facts. She was attacking the person presenting them. When someone cannot destroy the truth, they often try to destroy the witness carrying it. Judge Judy slowly opened the case file. She didn't reach for the envelope. Not yet timing mattered. She flipped exactly one page before calmly asking the clerk to confirm a timestamp attached to one specific exhibit. Karen smiled. She thought the judge was searching for something she wouldn't find. She had absolutely no idea that the document Judge Judy had just requested wasn't there to prove Michael's claim. It was there to test Karen's next answer. And hidden inside that sealed envelope was one piece of evidence that would make her cruel joke about an accent impossible to defend. The courtroom didn't know it yet. But the countdown had already begun. Michael Bennett never looked like someone who expected sympathy. He looked like someone who had spent years proving himself in rooms where people judged him before they heard him speak. The leather document case resting on the plaintiff's table was older than some of the people sitting in the courtroom gallery. Its handle had been stitched together twice, and every scratch across its surface seemed to tell the story of another long day spent trying to build an honest career. Judge Judy noticed those details immediately. Experienced judges understand that people often reveal their priorities through the things they refuse to replace. Expensive appearances can be purchased. Quiet consistency cannot. Michael wasn't asking the court to feel sorry for him. He was asking the court to listen. That difference mattered. On paper, the lawsuit appeared surprisingly ordinary. Karen Whitmore had hired Michael, an independent language consultant with nearly 20 years of experience, to adapt an advertising campaign for several North American communities where precise communication mattered. The project involved more than translating words. It required understanding regional expressions, cultural nuances, and legal terminology that could affect thousands of customers. Michael completed every deadline. Every revision, every requested correction. Karen approved each stage herself. Then, just days before the final payment became due, everything changed. Instead of sending the remaining balance, Karen emailed him a short message claiming the work had become unusable. She insisted his communication style confused clients. She questioned his professionalism. Then she stopped answering his calls altogether. At first glance, it sounded like an ordinary business disagreement, but Judge Judy had already begun seeing something much deeper. This case wasn't really about unpaid invoices. It was about dignity. Michael wasn't fighting over a paycheck. He was fighting against an accusation that threatened the reputation he had spent decades building. For independent professionals, reputation isn't simply part of the job. It is the job, lost trust once, and years of honest work can disappear almost overnight. As Michael quietly explained the timeline, his voice remained calm despite the obvious pressure. He never interrupted Karen. He never exaggerated. When he couldn't remember an exact date, he admitted it instead of guessing. Truth rarely needs perfect memory, it only needs consistency. Judge Judy listened without interruption. Every answer fit naturally with the documents already sitting inside the case file. Karen, however, couldn't remain silent. She rolled her eyes repeatedly. She whispered comments loud enough for nearby spectators to hear. Oh, here comes another emotional speech. He practices this. It's all an act. Each interruption seemed designed to accomplish one goal, not to challenge the evidence, to embarrass the man presenting it. The narrator could almost feel the shift inside the courtroom. People who had entered believing this was a routine contract dispute were beginning to notice something unsettling. Karen wasn't simply defending herself. She seemed determined to convince everyone that Michael himself was the problem. Judge Judy had seen that strategy countless times before. When someone wants the facts ignored, they often attack the character of the person holding those facts. Michael finally reached into the worn leather case. Instead of pulling out another invoice, he carefully removed an old, handwritten thank you card. Its edges had yellowed with age. The handwriting belonged to a client from nearly 15 years earlier. The short message read, "You didn't just translate our words. You made sure our family was finally understood." The courtroom grew noticeably quieter. Michael looked at the card for only a moment before placing it gently beside the invoices. "I keep it with my work," he said softly. "Not because it's evidence, because it reminds me why I do this." Judge Judy didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Sometimes the smallest object explains a person's character better than an hour of testimony ever could. Karen laughed again. "A greeting card?" she scoffed. "Seriously?" But this time, almost no one joined her. Something had changed. Even the spectators who knew nothing about contracts could recognize genuine pride when they saw it. And for the first time since entering the courtroom, Karen's confident smile seemed just a little forced. She still believed she controlled the room. She still believed Michael had no way to prove what really happened behind the emails, the invoices, and the canceled payment. What she didn't realize was that Judge Judy had already begun comparing Michael's quiet consistency with Karen's growing impatience. One of them appeared focused on the truth, the other appeared focused on winning. And very soon, the courtroom would meet the woman who had spent years convincing everyone she was always the smartest person in the room. Karen Whitmore walked into the courtroom with the confidence of someone who had spent years convincing people that confidence itself was proof. Her tailored designer suit, polished briefcase, and perfectly rehearsed smile projected success before she said a single word. To anyone meeting her for the first time, she looked like the kind of businesswoman who always stayed one step ahead. That image was exactly what she wanted everyone to see. Outside the courtroom, Karen had built a respected marketing consulting company that specialized in helping businesses expand into new markets. She spoke at networking events. She posted motivational videos online about leadership and professionalism. Her social media pages were filled with photographs of charity galas, award ceremonies, and inspirational quotes about treating people with respect. But appearances can become carefully managed performances. The narrator understood something the courtroom was only beginning to notice. Public reputation and private character are not always the same thing. Some people spend years polishing one because they know the other cannot survive daylight. According to Karen, Michael Bennett wasn't simply mistaken. He was incompetent. She claimed his translation work had damaged an important advertising campaign and forced her company to hire someone else. She insisted that his speech patterns confused clients and that she had every legal right to withhold payment. The words sounded polished. They had likely been rehearsed dozens of times before entering court. Yet Judge Judy wasn't listening only to the answers. She was watching the behavior surrounding them. Karen never looked directly at Michael while criticizing him. Instead, she addressed everyone else in the room. The judge, the audience, even her own attorney, as though Michael were invisible. Experienced judges recognize that behavior immediately. People trying to prove facts usually speak to the person involved. People trying to perform for an audience usually speak around them, Karen continued confidently. He wants sympathy because he knows he can't win on the evidence. She shrugged dramatically. Honestly, I hired him because I wanted to help a small independent contractor. That was obviously a mistake. Michael lowered his eyes for only a second, not because the accusation surprised him, because it hurt. This wasn't the first time someone had tried to erase years of honest work with a few carefully chosen insults. Judge Judy noticed the brief movement immediately. Real emotional pain rarely arrives with dramatic speeches. Sometimes it appears in the split second someone chooses silence instead of anger. Karen mistook that silence for weakness. She smiled again. You know, she continued, folding her arms, people keep acting like I'm the villain simply because I expect professional communication. That's not discrimination. That's business. The courtroom remained quiet. The statement sounded reasonable on its surface. But Judge Judy had already noticed 3 separate contradictions between Karen's testimony and the documents she'd reviewed before the hearing even began. She wasn't ready to expose them. Not yet. Timing matters in court. Liars often rush toward conclusions. Truth is patient. Karen leaned back comfortably, convinced she had taken complete control of the hearing. Then she made another mistake. Instead of discussing invoices or deadlines, she returned to Michael's accent. I had clients asking me to repeat everything he said, she claimed with a dismissive laugh. Frankly, communication matters. If people can't understand you, maybe this line of work isn't for you. A murmur spread across the gallery. Several spectators shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Michael said nothing. His attorney quietly placed a hand on his arm. Signaling him to remain calm, Judge Judy slowly removed her reading glasses. She placed them carefully on the bench. No anger crossed her face, no raised voice, only complete stillness. That silence felt heavier than any argument. The bailiff instinctively glanced toward Karen. Even her own attorney subtly adjusted his posture, as though sensing something dangerous approaching. The narrator could almost feel the atmosphere changing. Karen believed she had strengthened her defense. In reality, she had just revealed exactly how she viewed the man sitting across from her. Judge Judy finally looked directly into Karen's eyes. When she spoke, her voice remained calm enough to make every word impossible to ignore. "Mrs. Whitmore." She paused. "I'd like you to answer one very simple question." Karen smiled confidently. Of course. She had absolutely no idea that the next question wasn't designed to gather information. It was designed to expose the lie hidden beneath every confident answer she'd given since walking into that courtroom. And once she answered it, there would be no way back. Judge Judy had not raised her voice once. She hadn't accused Karen of lying. She hadn't criticized her attitude. Instead, she allowed the silence to settle over the courtroom until every restless movement became impossible to ignore. The ticking wall clock suddenly sounded louder than anyone remembered. Even the gallery seemed to stop breathing. Then came the question. "Mrs. Whitmore," Judge Judy said calmly, "if Mr. Bennett's communication was truly the reason you refused to pay him, why did your company approve every stage of his work for 6 consecutive weeks without a single written complaint?" Karen's confident smile flickered, only for a moment, but Judge Judy saw it. Experienced judges understand that real surprise cannot be rehearsed. It appears before a person has time to invent another answer. Karen quickly recovered. "Because we trusted he'd fix the problems before the final delivery," Judge Judy nodded once. "And where is that request?" Karen blinked. "What request?" "The one asking him to fix those problems." Karen hesitated. It was discussed during phone calls." Judge Judy glanced toward the clerk. "I've reviewed every email submitted by both parties." Another pause. "There isn't one message mentioning communication concerns." Karen swallowed. Her attorney shifted uncomfortably beside her. For the first time that morning, he quietly opened his legal pad instead of sitting back with folded arms. The narrator could almost feel the confidence leaving Karen's carefully constructed performance. Liars often prepare for difficult questions. They rarely prepare for simple ones. Judge Judy leaned back. "This court isn't interested in assumptions." She folded her hands. "It is interested in evidence." Karen attempted another smile. "Well, not everything gets documented." "No," Judge Judy replied softly, "but businesses protecting 6-figure clients usually document everything." The courtroom fell silent again. That single sentence landed harder than a shouted accusation ever could. Karen's shoulders stiffened. She glanced briefly toward her attorney, silently searching for reassurance. He offered none. Judge Judy reached for Michael's invoice packet. Each page carried Karen's electronic approval. Each revision had been signed off. Each deadline had been accepted. Each payment milestone acknowledged, one after another. Like stepping stones leading toward a truth Karen had hoped no one would follow. This invoice. Judge Judy held up the first document. "You approved it." She lifted another. "And this revision?" Karen answered quietly. "Yes." "The second revision?" "Yes." "The third?" "Yes." Judge Judy placed the papers neatly back onto the bench. "So help me understand." Her tone remained almost conversational. "Why would a business continue approving work it supposedly couldn't understand?" Karen opened her mouth. Nothing came out. For several long seconds, the courtroom heard only silence. Real fear does not always shake. Sometimes it sits perfectly still. Before the truth goes any further, tell us in the comments, what do you think is inside that sealed envelope? Or, if you can already sense justice closing in, comment *justice below. because what Judge Judy was about to reveal changed the entire direction of this courtroom. Karen finally forced out an answer. We were trying to give him every opportunity. Judge Judy slowly nodded. I see. She didn't sound convinced. She sounded finished. Then she reached toward the sealed envelope the clerk had been protecting since the hearing began. Karen's eyes widened. For the first time all morning, she stopped pretending not to care. What's that?" she asked. Judge Judy didn't answer immediately. Instead, she carefully broke the seal. Inside rested a flash drive, a printed transcript, and one certification page bearing the logo of Karen's own company. The narrator noticed something almost no one else did. Karen's breathing changed. It became shorter, faster. Because she recognized the company letterhead before anyone else in the courtroom had the chance, Judge Judy removed the transcript first. She didn't read it aloud, not yet. Instead, she looked directly at Karen. "You testified under oath that Mr. Bennett's communication skills made your project unusable." Karen nodded cautiously. "Yes. And you're certain that's your testimony?" "Absolutely." Judge Judy gently placed the transcript on top of the case file. "Good." She then held up the flash drive between two fingers. "Because what's recorded here was created by your own marketing department exactly 12 days before you refused to pay him." Karen's face lost its color. Her attorney slowly closed his eyes. The gallery leaned forward almost in unison. Judge Judy turned toward the courtroom monitor. "Let's see what your own company had to say before this lawsuit ever existed." The courtroom monitor flickered to life. For a brief second, all anyone could see was a company logo, followed by the date and timestamp Judge Judy had quietly verified earlier that morning, June 14, exactly 12 days before Karen refused to pay Michael Bennett. Judge Judy didn't say a word. She simply nodded toward the clerk. "Play it." The room fell silent. Karen stared at the screen, her confidence draining away with every passing second. She recognized the video before anyone else did. It had never been meant for a courtroom. It was an internal presentation prepared by her own marketing department to celebrate the successful completion of the campaign. A young project manager appeared on the screen. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said with obvious enthusiasm, "before we launch nationally, I want to recognize someone whose localization work made this campaign feel authentic across every region we targeted." Karen shifted uncomfortably in her chair. The project manager continued. "Michael Bennett didn't simply translate our content. He helped us avoid cultural mistakes that could have cost this company millions. His attention to detail exceeded every expectation." Several people in the gallery exchanged confused looks. Judge Judy remained perfectly still. The video continued. Another employee stepped forward. "I've worked on dozens of campaigns, and honestly, Michael's communication throughout this project was clearer than most agencies we've hired." Karen slowly lowered her eyes. The narrator could almost feel the atmosphere collapsing around her. The evidence wasn't emotional. It wasn't dramatic. It was devastating because it came from Karen's own employees. Truth does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives recorded before anyone realizes they'll someday need it. The final speaker appeared on screen. To everyone's surprise, it was Karen herself. She smiled confidently into the company camera. "I want everyone to give Michael Bennett a round of applause. His professionalism, patience, and communication made this one of the smoothest collaborations we've had all year." The recording ended. Double silence. No one moved. No one whispered. Even the bailiff seemed frozen. Michael never smiled. Instead, he quietly looked down at the old leather document case resting beside him. This case had never really been about proving he was talented. It had been about proving he wasn't the person Karen later claimed he was. Judge Judy slowly folded her hands. "Mrs. Whitmore." Karen didn't answer. Judge Judy repeated her name. This time Karen looked up, her eyes already filling with tears. "Were you lying to your employees when you praised Mr. Bennett?" She allowed the question to settle. "Or are you lying to this court now?" Karen opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her attorney leaned toward her. He whispered something no one else could hear. Karen swallowed hard. She stopped. I made a mistake. Judge Judy didn't react. What kind of mistake? Karen's voice cracked. I lost a major client after the campaign. Judge Judy waited. Karen continued. They blamed budget overruns. I couldn't admit the project had gone over budget because of decisions I approved. The courtroom remained silent. So, Judge Judy asked calmly, "What did you do?" Karen closed her eyes. I withheld Michael's payment. Her shoulders began trembling. I thought if I blamed his communication, no one would question the missing money. A quiet gasp spread through the gallery. Michael slowly looked up for the first time since entering court. He wasn't looking at Karen with anger. He looked at her with disappointment. The narrator understood why money can be earned again. A damaged reputation can take years to rebuild. Judge Judy reached toward the handwritten thank you card Michael had carried inside his worn leather case. She placed it beside Karen's company's glowing performance review. One represented years of earned trust. The other exposed a carefully manufactured lie. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Karen covered her face with both hands. The woman who had mocked someone's accent less than an hour earlier could no longer keep her own voice steady. Every confident sentence she had delivered had collapsed beneath the weight of her own company's words. Judge Judy looked toward the clerk. "Prepare the judgment." Karen's attorney slowly lowered his head. He knew the case was over. But what Judge Judy was about to say next would become the line everyone remembered long after the courtroom emptied. Judge Judy looked down at the file one final time. She didn't rush. She didn't lecture. She understood that the strongest courtroom moments are rarely the loudest. The truth had already done the heavy lifting. All that remained was to place it where it belonged. Karen sat motionless. Only an hour earlier, she had walked into the courtroom convinced she could control the narrative with confidence, polished language, and one cruel remark about another person's accent. Now, she couldn't even meet Judge Judy's eyes. The gallery remained completely silent. Judge Judy folded her hands. "Mrs. Whitmore, this court has heard your testimony, reviewed your documents, and watched your own company's internal presentation." She paused. "Those three things cannot all be true at the same time." Karen lowered her head. Judge Judy continued. "You praised Mr. Bennett's communication when your business succeeded. You attacked his communication only after you needed someone else to carry the blame for your financial decisions." Karen quietly wiped away another tear. Judge Judy wasn't interested in humiliating her. She was interested in accountability. "A courtroom," she said, "is not a place where people rewrite history because the truth became inconvenient." The words settled heavily across the room. Judge Judy reviewed the damages one final time. The evidence clearly establishes that Mr. Bennett completed every contractual obligation required of him. Every milestone was approved. Every revision was accepted. Your own internal records praised his work, and your refusal to pay him was not based on performance, but on an attempt to shift responsibility for your own business losses. She looked directly at Karen. "This court enters judgment in favor of Mr. Michael Bennett." The clerk began recording the decision. Judge Judy continued. "You will pay the outstanding contract balance in full, together with court costs and all allowable filing fees." Karen nodded silently. Judge Judy wasn't finished. She added that the certified recording and accompanying exhibits would remain part of the official court record because they directly contradicted Karen's sworn testimony. Karen's attorney slowly placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. He knew there was nothing left to argue. Then Judge Judy delivered the sentence that everyone in the courtroom would remember long after the hearing ended. Asterisk. Mocking someone's voice never strengthens your truth. It only exposes the weakness hiding behind your own words. No one applauded. Real justice doesn't need applause. Michael quietly opened the worn leather document case one last time. He carefully returned the handwritten thank you card to its place inside. The old case had entered the courtroom carrying years of quiet dignity. It left carrying something even more valuable, his reputation. As he stood to leave, Judge Judy called his name. Mr. Bennett. He turned. I hope today's judgment reminds you that integrity takes longer to build than a lie, but it also lasts much longer. Michael smiled for the first time all morning. Thank you, Your Honor. There was no celebration. No dramatic outburst. Only relief. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sunlight seemed brighter than when the hearing had begun. Within 24 hours, several of Karen's former employees contacted Michael privately to apologize for remaining silent after learning how he had been treated. Within 48 hours, Karen's company's board announced an internal ethics review into its contract approval and payment practices. Within 72 hours, Michael received 2 new consulting offers from businesses that had followed the case and admired the professionalism he displayed under relentless personal attacks. Ironically, the very reputation Karen had tried to destroy became stronger because she had forced it into the open. The narrator reflected on the lesson the courtroom had quietly delivered that day. This case had never truly been about an unpaid invoice. It had never been about an accent. It had been about dignity, about the dangerous habit of judging people by how they sound instead of what they contribute, about believing that confidence can erase documented truth. Judge Judy had recognized something within the first 47 seconds that Karen never understood until it was too late. Respect is not measured by perfect pronunciation. Character is not measured by polished speech. And credibility is never determined by the loudest person in the room. Sometimes justice arrives through a single question. Sometimes it arrives through a forgotten company recording. And sometimes it arrives because one ordinary person refuses to stop protecting the truth, even when everyone else stops listening. If this story reminded you that respect and truth matter more than appearances, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more unforgettable courtroom stories, and share it with someone who believes character always speaks louder than mockery. And tell us in the comments, if you had been sitting in that courtroom, what was the moment you knew Karen's case had completely fallen apart?